Kerri Flood graduated from the Canadian College of Homeopathic Medicine in 2006 and subsequently completed her holistic nutrition diploma. Kerri weaves nutritional healing into her holistic healthcare practice and is a world of knowledge in the health and wellness arena. Kerri taught the nutrition course that I took last summer, and I was blown away not only by her depth of knowledge, but also how she shared client success stories to help tie it all together. As I'm currently studying homeopathy and loving every second, I thought it would be really fun to get Kerri on to delve into this practice with me and help shed some light on the world of homeopathy. Welcome, Kerri.
Hi, happy to be here.
Let's start with the basics. What is homeopathy?
Yeah, that sounds always like such an easy question. So if you narrow it down in the really short 30-second answer, it's a systematic method of stimulating the body's vital force to stimulate healing and to cure disease. So that's never usually enough of an answer. So I'll kind of go a little bit more. What we do is we use very specific medicines. So remedies that are selected specifically based on the symptoms that someone is experiencing. And we use those remedies to actually overshadow their existing disease picture and trigger a healing response in the patient. In responding to this artificial disease state that we superimpose on top of the actual disease state, we induce the body to heal specifically the root causes of the disease causing process. So we essentially treat the root cause of disease using the signs and symptoms of the disease as the signposts.
Which is so powerful to be able to treat the patient in a whole in its entirety versus just one little symptom that they're coming to the doctor with. Kerri, what's the basic principle of homeopathy?
The basic principle of homeopathy is that two very similar disease states cannot exist in an individual at the same time, and that the weaker disease state will be overtaken by the stronger disease state. So how we leverage that is very clever people, 200 plus years ago, figured out that if we administer various medicines and substances that produce the same symptom picture in a healthy person as they are in the sick person, that the medicine state will actually overshadow and take over the disease state, as long as the medicine is stronger than the disease picture. So the trick here is to figure out how to get medicine that's strong enough into a person so that it overshadows that disease picture in ways that we don't actually harm the person with the medicine. And this is where potentized medicines come in. So we have to somehow give a really large dose of something to somebody so that we can get rid of their cold, their flu, their allergies, their nausea, their endocrine disruption. We have to figure out how to do that. And so they figured out that by potentizing medicine, which is a rigorous process of serial succussion and dilution, it actually produces a medicine that stimulates a healing reaction with no risk of side effects, which is super cool because this happens both in test tubes and in clinic. So we can see it happen over and over again. The potentization is not essential for homeopathy. Homeopathy is this idea of like cures like, so that the bigger picture always overshadows the smaller picture of disease state and takes over. But it's the potentization that allows us to really utilize that principle without causing any harm. The mechanics of potentization are, I think, beyond our scope here, but they are really cool if anyone wants to look into it. Modern science is doing some really interesting research, and they're looking at some very cool theories about how this actually works. And they're looking and seeing nanoparticles in homeopathic remedies. There's a lot of people investigating quantum physics associated with homeopathic remedies and really exploring the quantum idea that all matter is actually energy. So that all plays in. But essentially, homeopathy is that very simple idea that the bigger state overshadows the smaller state. And then we utilize that to trigger healing in the system.
Right. And you mentioned remedies and they come from nature. Maybe just give a little explanation of that and then give us a real world example of what a remedy looks like.
Yeah. So with remedies, the way that we test remedies or we figure out what they do is we actually administer them to healthy people in quite large doses. And the reason we work with healthy people is because we want to see what kind of symptoms they'll end up producing. So we can then match those to a sick person. So a really good example of that, and something we all experience in our kitchens, is onion, allium cepa. So that's something that we use often in homeopathy for allergies, hay fevers, and colds and flus sometimes. And allium cepa is, as we know in our kitchen, onion, produces the red eyes, burning, watering, like tons and tons of watering. Your nose will run. And very specifically, your eyes burn and your nose is bland, right? Your nose isn't burning, your eyes are burning. In with someone who's got hay fever, where they have like burning, red, watering eyes and a runny nose, we actually give them allium cepa. So we give them onion and we give it to them in a potentized form. And then that disease or that artificial remedy state overshadows the actual hay fever, stimulates the healing process, and then gets rid of the hay fever altogether because the body has been triggered into healing it.
Right. Right. That's a great example. I mean, we all hear of arnica, more and more.
A very good one too.
Yeah. Are prescribing it. If you're having surgery, if you're bruised, they'll talk to you about an arnica. But I feel like that's really the only homeopathic remedy that is kind of the masses are familiar with. So it's the onion's a great example. So people can actually have a real world example of what a remedy actually is. I think that's a big piece that's missing.
Yeah. Yeah, I know a lot of people, they don't understand what it is that we're doing and what we're giving them, because we're not giving it to them in its raw form. We're giving them something in a potentized form. And homeopathic remedies essentially all look the same. They look like these little balls, right? So I don't know if you can see this. If you can. They look like these tiny little pellets. Yeah. But in this pellet is actually the potentized medicine. So this pellet is just holding the potentized medicine. Right. This in and of itself, the pellet is inert. And then we put the medicine into that. So the dosage is really quite easy, but I know many people look at it and they're like, you're giving me a bunch of little pellets. And it's because it's being potentized so that we can actually be giving it in very large doses, without any side effect.
Right. Yeah. And I guess one of the main point, I'm going to ask you the question, like the difference between homeopathy and allopathy, but the biggest point of that would be homeopathic remedies are tested on healthy individuals to get reactions. Whereas, pharmaceutical drugs are tested on, first of all, animals, which it's hard to correlate to the human body, but we're not actually following along to see what's truly going on in the body with that pharmaceutical drug. We're just Band-Aid solution to try to make them feel a little bit better so they can get through their day, but we're not healing anything.
Yeah, and that's the big difference. So with homeopathy, our goal is to look at that root cause. So we only use the symptoms as guideposts to the things that are underlying. So the symptoms are an expression of the disease state. We're not treating the symptoms. We're using those as guideposts. And we're using the mental, the physical, and the emotional, so the whole totality of the disease state. A great way to think about that is when you have the stomach flu, you might have a stomach or even food poisoning. You have a pathogen that's impacting your gut, but you feel it all through your whole body. You're achy, you're painful, your mood has changed. You're not feeling like yourself when you're ill. We use all of that to figure out what the root cause of that disease state is. We can't test on animals because we can't ask them what's altered in their mood or what's altered in their mental processing state. We can't ask them if they're having a hard time cognitively functioning. Right. So we don't use animals. We want to know from people what the totality has changed when they're taking that substance. The other big piece there is that unlike allopathic medicine, we're not treating the symptoms. So allopathic medicines, they treat the symptoms. Their goal is to get rid of the symptom, and then they just suppress the symptom by overpowering the body and the natural energy of the system. One of my favorite analogy that I love about the allopathic medicine, is that treating symptoms is like unscrewing the warning light in your car and then calling it fixed. Right. So the problem still exists. You've just disabled the body's ability to tell you that there's an underlying problem. And that problem will continue to get worse over time, but your body won't have any way to express it, or it'll have to find a new way to express the disturbance that's going on in your system. Right. So that's why with homeopathy, we look at really even small alterations in healthy functioning, because any deviation away from health is important to us as homeopaths, to tell us what direction the body is heading in and where the disease state is pushing the system.
Right. So an example of that would be somebody with acne goes to their allopathic doctor, and the doctor gives them a prescription to treat their acne, and the acne may go away. But what does that lead to?
Well, often with children, what we see is with acne or with eczema treatment in children, it leads to lung issues. We see a lot of correlation between the suppression of skin symptoms and the manifestation of breathing or respiratory problems. So asthma, or any kind of bronchial weakness tends to manifest after the suppression of skin symptoms, which is obviously not a good direction of cure. You don't want things to go from your skin into your lungs. Ideally, you want them gone from your system, but if anything, you want them to move outwards to more superficial areas of the body. You don't want to drive them deeper inwards. We see that as well with the correlation of people who get a lot of topical treatment for skin rashes, eczema, psoriasis. Eventually, after those topical treatments, they'll end up with arthritis in the joints. And this is seen as a normal progression of the disease. Mm-hmm. As a homeopath, I suggest that's not a normal progression. It's a suppression of the skin symptoms. And then that same disease pathology is at play, but now it's not on the surface. It's not on the skin. It drives deeper into the joints, and the body is still manifesting the disturbance. It's just now at a deeper, more problematic level in the joints.
Right. Wow. That's just crazy. That's really informative. That's what I also think is really powerful about homeopathy is you're getting to the root cause and you're finding that cure.
Yeah, that's a really important point, because a lot of people are very wary. They say things like, well, I don't want to take drugs. You're not actually taking the drug for very long. And we're creating a reaction in your system. Once your system figures out how to deal with the inner disturbance, to deal with the inner disease state, then your body knows how to do that and will continue to do that. Every now and again, we might need to remind it or reinforce it. But it's not, the goal of homeopathy is not to have you take the medicine for an ongoing, forever, ever period of time. It's to create a reaction until the disease state is healed. And then we stop treatment. Right. Because now you're better. So what would we treat? There's nothing left. That's the entire goal, is to stimulate that reaction in your system and then have your system take over and do it all by itself for the rest of your life.
So powerful. We talked a little bit about what can homeopathy treat. So we talked about acne, eczema, psoriasis. Do you want to give us a kind of, I know it can basically treat everything. So why don't you take that away?
Well, that's the thing, is that people often ask that question of, well, what can you treat? And it sounds like a flippant answer, but essentially everything. We can treat everything. If the body manifests it, then we can treat it. Things that are more complicated or more complex will take longer, a period of time, but there really isn't a limit, because it's not the medicine that's doing the work. It's the body that's doing the work. We're simply stimulating the body into that reaction. So if the body broke it, the body can fix it generally. The only times that it can get more complicated, and not impossible, but more complicated, is if there's a really strong polypharmacy picture. So if people are on multiple suppressive medications, or there has been extensive surgical alterations. So if organ systems have been removed from the body, then it's really hard for us to see what the symptoms are, because they've been so suppressed, either surgically suppressed because they've been removed, or chemically suppressed with a polypharmacy picture.
And it's not just physical manifestation, is it? It's not just physical things going on. It's mental, emotional. It could be insomnia. It could be reactive states. It could be anger or depression,
Yeah.
anxiety. I mean, the list is pretty exhaustive.
The list is exhaustive, and insomnia is a really good one because so many people experience it, and it's considered then so normal to have insomnia. And periodic insomnia, or insomnia that you can track to, I should not have had that coffee at 10 o'clock at night. Like, okay, that's a reasonable level of insomnia that happens if you're really, anxious for something the next day. But that should be very rare. And sleep is such a foundational part of our healing process. So if something is disturbing that on an ongoing basis, there is a host of problems that are associated with chronic insomnia, everything from heart disease to cancers to mental, emotional impacts. So something like that, there's so many people that I talk to and they're like, oh yeah, it's just normal insomnia. No, there's no such thing as normal insomnia. Sleeping is the normal healthy state. Any deviation from a healthy sleep is a problem. And it's not a problem you should be drugging. It's a problem that you need to start investigating why you're not sleeping and trying again to get to that root cause of that problem. What's creating the issue in your system that you're not able to maintain a healthy amount of sleep every night? And so, and that's something that then spirals. And then, 10 years later, you're sleep deprived, your system hasn't been repairing itself. You probably have some other issues going on now. Your mental, emotional health will have taken a toll. There's, it's those little things and they just start to spiral. And unfortunately, people are either encouraged to wait because it's not a big deal, or they just culturally as a society, we don't see it as such an issue. So people wait until they are starting to fall apart and they're really struggling through their everyday life. And of course we can help, but wouldn't it have been better to get help that much sooner so that they didn't have to spend 8 years struggling to sleep properly?
Yeah. Yeah. I love that we talked about sleep because that's such a huge issue for so many people. One of the things we talk about in homeopathy is an obstacle to cure. So can you explain what an obstacle to cure is and why it's important to factor this into the healing process?
The obstacles to cure are those things that are in our lives and are often seen as normal. They're societally often very generally accepted as okay. But for you, for the patient, looking at it, you realize that in your life, they're creating an obstacle to 100% healthy. But we can look at things like it can be too little exercise, too much work, too little water, too much coffee, not enough vegetables, too much alcohol, too much sugar, right? And again, I'm not suggesting that everyone needs to not have any of these things in their lives, but you have to be aware of what it is that's a problem for you.
Right.
And if it is that cup of coffee that gives you heart palpitations and you're still drinking it every single day and ending up with anxiety attacks, then that's the first place to start, because it doesn't matter what modality you're using. That one cup of coffee will continually create an impediment to your health.
Right.
The nice thing that I get to see in practice a lot is that as people generally get better and stronger and more vital, they start to find it a lot easier to get rid of or to shift their behavior away from the obstacles to cure that they put in place in their lives, often to support them, right? So someone who's got really bad insomnia is probably reaching for coffee because it makes them alert. And then they're so dragged out throughout the day that they're drinking coffee all day long. But then, of course, that coffee fuels the insomnia at night because they've got 6 cups of coffee in their body by the time they go to sleep at night. So as someone actually starts to sleep a little bit better and as they start to heal, they don't need the coffee as much. So then they're reaching for it less often. So there's this feedback loop that happens.
What does the future look like for homeopathy?
Sadly, good. I say that because people are less healthy, I think, and that doesn't, that's not good. And when I look out across the population, and after decades of really aggressive pharmaceutical use, we are seeing seniors age very badly. We're seeing increases in number of children with geriatric type diseases, triple bypasses in 12-year-olds. These are not things that we should be seeing. Rheumatoid arthritis in 10-year-olds, not something we should be seeing.
Wow.
We have rising rates of cancer, which is concerning, diabetes, heart disease, those types of things, and a really precipitous increase in multi-drug resistant bacteria and pathogens and fungus. Those are all really concerning, and I'm seeing more and more of those in my practice. The nice thing is that people are starting to look around for alternatives.
Right.
They're looking at how their parents are aging. They're looking at their friends and family around them. And they're seeing that the standards that we've been using for decades are not affording relief. They're not demonstrating cures. People are not becoming healthier. Homeopathy is an alternative that has stood the test of time, and that people actually get better when they use it.
It's sad to hear it the way you're saying it, that yeah, of course, we're going to need it because people are sicker. But the flip side is more and more people are becoming interested in natural, more healthy ways to cure. So
I'm starting to see more people that are coming through homeopathy, not even through an alternative health perspective, but they're actually coming at it from a science journal, engineering, quantum physics perspective, because modern science is starting to provide answers for the questions that a lot of people have, or provide explanations for some of these phenomenon that we see and don't yet understand. Why does potentization work? What's the mechanics behind that? And that's a sticking point for a lot of people. They really want to understand how it works and why it's possible.
Yeah, it's pretty phenomenal how far we've come. So is there anything else you feel is important to add on what we've been talking about?
I think just to highlight that idea that even little symptoms are important, and that, if you're told that it's just minor or it's not a problem or it should be expected with your age, that is my pet peeve, that it's normal with aging. Normal doesn't mean healthy. It just means a lot of people are doing it at the same time, but that doesn't mean it's a healthy way to age. Mm-hmm. So pay attention to those little symptoms, because those little symptoms are an expression of an inner disease state that is a disturbance in your system, and it's draining your vitality. It's draining your energy. If you leave that unchecked, that inner disturbance will eventually deplete you to the point that you will have more aggressive pathologies, and you will have more and more symptoms, and eventually some kind of critical illness. So pay attention to those. They're important.
That's right. Just stop normalizing and assuming that everything is just the way it should be because you're getting older. That shouldn't be how we're living our life.
Especially women. Women are told that so often.
That's right.
That they are just it's normal. It happens. Yeah. Well, of course it happens. Lots of things happen to people, but that doesn't mean you have to accept it. Right. And it doesn't mean that you're well.
Oh, well, thank you so much, Kerri. This has been
so great chatting with you.
And then I look forward to we're going to do another segment on nutrition. So stay tuned for that, everyone. But thanks so much, Kerri. You're just such a wealth of information.
It was a lot of fun. Thanks a lot.